Hello all, I hope all is well. We are continuing with our weekly portion review, and this week we are in the portion of Pinchas. This portion famously talks about uh, Pinchas from the tribe of Levite, also a descendant of Aaron, and there is this act of inappropriate behavior between the chieftain of the tribe of Simeon and a woman as well. And this is in the backdrop of what's happening with Balak and Bilam, that they brought these foreign women into the camp of Israelites to in order to cause this kind of trouble. And Pinchas sees such an act. There seems to be an uncertainty what to do, and Pinchas acts, takes out his spear, and kills them both. Uh, this portion also talks about, and by doing that, he stops the plague that was around the camp of Israel. And there's also the famous story of Slovchad's daughters who go to Moses and demand a portion of land, and there's a whole uh, revolution with regards to their place and women's place with regards to land ownership. Uh, we're going to focus specifically on the Pinchas story, the Pinchas element. The name itself, by the way, originates most probably from comes from an Egyptian origin, which can mean the dark skinned one or the Nubian, and this relates to a specific uh, pharaoh or ruler that was at that time. Some translated to the exalted one, which potentially connects more to the story of the biblical figure we're talking about, because we do see him as an exalted one. Either way, I want to focus on the question, which is how could we connect Pinchas' act of zealotry with the covenant of peace that is also granted to him and his descendants as priests. Right? So this seems to be a contradictory, and we already knew at that time that zealotry and peace don't necessarily go hand in hand. Nevertheless, right, the verse deliberately reinforces this contradiction and tells us in Numbers 25:12, "Behold, I give to him my covenant of peace, because he was zealous for his God." Right? So quite curious. Now, the Midrash tells us that the tribes actually criticized Pinchas. They said Pinchas, on his mother's side, actually comes from Jethro. Jethro would be his grandfather on his mother's side, and their claim was that Jethro himself comes from a background of idolatry, and this is why we see this in Pinchas as well. And his violence is attributed to the remnants of his idol worship. And then they're claiming, who is he to strike a prince of Israel, right? The chieftain of the tribe of Simeon. And yet we know, again, the scripture explicitly testifies that that this specific zealotry was actually desired by God. Right? So we see that there is some zealotry that is desirable and some that is not. And we have to see which one is which. Some that come from love and some that come from actual anger and agitation. Right? So in Pinchas' case, we know that it comes from love. And we could even see in verse 25, in Numbers 25:7, and Pinchas saw, and he arose from among the congregation, right? He sees himself as part of the collective, part of the group. He sees that the plague is spreading amongst all the people and not stopping, and he has to do something. And he understands that Zimri, the chieftain of Simeon, is the cause of all this, and he has to act. Now, by explicitly linking Pinchas to Aaron the priest, we learn that his act was because he inherited the attributes of Aaron, right? Who loved peace and pursued peace, and he did so not out of anger. And how Pinchas was acting wasn't out of a momentary burst of anger. And throughout all of Jewish history, we know that there's episodes of zealotry which we can learn from. So we have uh, uh, Simeon and Levi together when their sister is taken by Shechem, right? They kill all the people of Shechem post their circumcision. We have Moses' zealotry, right? And after the golden calf, right, he takes all the Levites and they kill 3,000 of the Israelites as well. We have, of course, the act of Pinchas over here. We have the deeds of the Hasmoneans down the line, and there's others as well. Now, the required distinction is that their zealotry uh, as a constant way of behavior is wrong, but if it comes sometimes, it could be actually a very powerful tool, right? So Jacob actually blesses Simon and Levi, and he tells them, I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them among Israel. Because when the forces of zealotry, which we see in Simon and in Levi in the story of Shem, when they're concentrated and connected together, they're very, very dangerous. And about this, he also tells them later on, let my soul not enter their council, let my honor not be united with their assembly. Right? So, on the one hand, one who is never able to somewhat be a zealous lacks a sensitivity to evil and wickedness. On the other hand, if you're only thinking about zealotry, you are the one that ends up acting wicked yourself. And there's a well-known debate in Jewish thought how to evaluate the Bar Kokhba revolt. Right? Some claim that the zealotry of Bar Kokhba and Rabbi Akiva, who the rabbi who supported him, brought a great disaster upon the nation of Israel. Now, others understood this act of zealotry as needed because it's very possible that Judaism would have been lost and the Jewish people would have entirely disappeared off the historical stage if they fully assimilated into the Hellenistic worldview, and that's why that zealotry was needed. Right, it really preserves the seed of hope for future generations. And we can also see this with Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, right, who he was very zealous against the Roman rule, yet he carried within him the seed of national revival for the future, which we also saw in his Kabbalistic teachings and the Zohar, which is associated to him. And you could see now with Pinchas that originally there's a story of Levi and Simeon, the two archetypes, and we see them acting in zealotry towards Shem, and they get called out by their father. And now all these years later, we get to see two of these characters, two of these archetypes, so to speak, meet up again. But we see Pinchas from the tribe of Levi, and we see Simeon is the one actually acting in what his forefather fought against. Right? His forefather fought against this whole idea of having my sister, engaging with a Gentile. Yet now the chieftain himself is engaging in the same act. And so it seems that what his forefather did was actually coming out from a pure emotional place. And what Levite was doing was actually zealotry for a certain purpose. And down the line, we see that these two people converged again. And if doing so for the right reason, then you could tame that zealotry and actually use it for an element of peace. And eventually, we know that the Levites and the priests ultimately end up soothing that temperament and use that passion to teach the Torah, spread the Torah around the people of Israel, and act as a vessel to allow people to take their needs, questions, doubts to the temple and through the priest, elevated and oriented towards God. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.